August 24th, 2015. You made the promise, and I'll quote it here, "No veteran will be forced to fight their own government for the support and compensation they have earned." Yet you are still currently in a legal battle with veterans regarding equal support and compensation to their peers. You have ISIL or ISIS members coming into a reintegration program. You did a backdoor deal with Omar Khadr with not even stepping into the courtroom. So again, my question is, what veterans were you talking about? Was it the ones that fought for the freedoms and values that you so proudly boast about, or was it the ones who fought against? Because honestly, Mr. Prime Minister, I was prepared to be injured in the line of duty when I joined the military. Nobody forced me to join the military. I was prepared to be killed in action. What I wasn't prepared for, Mr. Prime Minister, is Canada turning its back on me. So which veteran was it that you were talking about?
Why are we still fighting against certain veterans groups in court? Because they're asking for more than we are able to give right now.
I'm Frank Vaughn. It's February 20th, 2025, and we begin with that clip to highlight that the problems with the Canadian military and the Trudeau and Trudeau-Singh government go back a long way, a deep-seated history. What inspires today's video is that the Canadian military has highlighted how they have a recruitment shortage, considering they only have 68,000 active members between the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. They are short 15,000 personnel. I can't emphasize how big a problem that is. If the Canadian military was 100% ready and 100% staffed, we still don't have sufficient assets, not just to defend the country, but to even quell significant civil disobedience. The military is defenseless as a result of Trudeau's policies. And before there's a race to the comment section to correct me, I do understand that the Canadian military has been denuded for some 60 years. You have to go all the way back to Diefenbaker and the cancellation of the Avro-Arrow program when we started to lay down our national defense and become completely dependent on the United States. I opened with that clip to highlight that Veterans Affairs hasn't improved since then. It's actually gotten worse. RCMP called to investigate multiple cases of veterans being offered medical assistance and dying. For anybody out there who doesn't understand Canada, we have a program now where we off Canadian citizens. They wanted to expand it, to give it to people who are having mental health issues or who are addicted. Instead of giving them care, we offered to kill them. That's Canada. Now, they backed off on that because the public isn't quite that hypnotized yet, but give it time. If these guys are in power long enough and they control the media long enough, they'll probably convince you that dying is good for your health, too. Veterans Affairs offering suicide while they give payments to Omar Khadr, $10 million, while they bring ISIS warriors back into Canada, rehabilitate them, give them money, allow Hezbollah and Hamas to organize right here, to run crime networks, to launder money, and then infiltrate into the United States to try and undermine their government. Watch my videos. This isn't fake news. I give you the receipts. I give you the sources. This is Canada today. Although we started this video with the veterans who have been left behind, our focus today is the recruitment shortage and why that might be happening, and at the end, Canada's novel solution to that recruitment problem, which is going to leave us in even more dire straits. Let's go back through history. State of Canadian Armed Forces combat readiness growing worse. Government report warns. This is from March 7th, 2024. The Department of National Defense report says almost half of our military's equipment is unserviceable. This is while we give away billions of dollars to Ukraine to fight in a useless war, while our soldiers are left behind languishing. Our combat readiness is running about 50%. That's before you account for the fact that we have this massive recruitment shortage. This from the counter signal. Trudeau's donations to Ukraine have left military depleted. That's from the defense minister. We have exhausted inventory. From the Canadian Armed Forces, Anand said nervously. There are capacity issues. We gave it all away in a war that can't be won, and we left our people behind. Liberals impose a culture of wokeism on the Canadian Armed Forces. This is from March 13th, 2023. Instead of focusing on combat readiness, instead of focusing on the ability to kill and to defend, we focus on woke politics, gender identity. Gays are people too. That's the modern Canadian Army. Morale is in the pits. Cutting $1 billion from our already underfunded military is preposterous. This is from September of 2023. Underfunded, woke nonsense, leaving our people behind while we give our money and military hardware away to a corrupt government in Ukraine, supporting them. 10 years, they were ethnically and culturally cleansing eastern Ukraine. That's our people in Ukraine. Maybe this has something to do with the recruitment problem. Trudeau says Canada can meet NATO's military spending benchmark by 2032. So let me get this straight. He's got all kinds of money for gay monuments in Ottawa. He's got all kinds of money for Ukraine. He's got billions of dollars for DEI programs in foreign countries. He's got all kinds of money for the propaganda media in this country. He's got money for everything political. He's got money for China. He's got money for everybody except the Canadian military. And it's not just money. It's not just recruitment standards, it's also discipline. The Canadian military has gradually weakened discipline standards, so much so that they actually had to back off because of public outcry. This is from 1945. What you need to know, Canada's military is in a dire state with a personnel shortage of 16,000 and readiness levels hovering around 50%. So that meager 68,000 that I talked about can only maybe be deployed 50%. There was another article that talked about how there's only 2 to 3 days worth of ammunition stockpiled, left over after we shipped it all to Ukraine. Despite promises to meet NATO's 2% GDP defense spending target by 2032, Canada's underfunded military risks being unprepared for modern challenges, not risks. We're already unprepared. Critical issues include recruitment and retention struggles, outdated equipment, and insufficient training. With Russia asserting Arctic ambitions and NATO raising defense expectations, Canada must prioritize military investment and readiness. We should have been prioritizing this 10 years ago. The reason the Americans are threatening our sovereignty now is so multi-fronted, and one of those fronts is our complete and total inability to defend our own borders. Listen to this. When I was in U.S. basic combat training in 1999 at Fort Knox, Kentucky, we had several military observers from Canada watching our activities. They seemed excited but also perplexed. One day a group asked us if we got beer breaks during training. They said they hadn't seen any beer sign and wondered if we were satisfied. We weren't sure if this was a joke, but the Canadians were dead serious. We've had a problem for a long time. Morale in the military is the pits. There were articles I read, I believe within the last year, talking about how mold is an issue within barracks. So the very health of our people is in jeopardy. This while Trudeau shovels piles of money, borrowed at interest in your children's names, into foreign countries, foreign projects, and, as I said, monuments in Ottawa, leaving our boys and our girls in the military completely underfunded and underserved. The headline from Lilia is Polyev promises to end woke culture in the military, and that's a good step. Polyev has also talked about how there's only two sexes, not in as strong a language as Trump down in the United States, but he has started talking sense. But what kind of military is Polyev going to inherit if he gets an election? With the NDP polling at 9%, with Mark Carney set to be installed, and we'll talk about that next, there may not be an election. With the NDP being wiped out, their only hold to power is to delay an election, and I believe they will. Carney is promising dictatorship, emergency acts, a basic socialist takeover of this country with universal basic income, with an emergency for housing, an emergency for the climate. This is a suspension of your charter for dozens of reasons, not just to fight Trump, as if that's something we need to do. So what kind of military would, theoretically, Polyev inherit? Let's listen to their plan to deal with the recruitment shortage.
Our focus is transformation and mobilization are the two key words that I use to describe the approach that we have at the moment. Of course, modernization means more than just changing how we recruit, but it also means changing who we recruit.
With support from the Vice Chief of Defense Staff and government partners, we are challenging outdated policies and practices to simplify security process for applicants with ties to other countries. Therefore, most applicants, included permanent resident, can begin basic training after receiving their reliability status clearance. Just recently, we have enrolled our 455th permanent resident, so great success. To build on how we recruit and ensuring that we don't unnecessarily screen good candidates out, we are modernizing our medical standard by reviewing our military common medical standards and aligning them with our new universality of service policy. This will give us more flexibility to recognize that people with low-risk medical condition may still serve fully in the Canadian Armed Forces.
If you had a hard time understanding what was being said there, I don't blame you, because I think lawyers compiled those statements for those women to read. But here's what it translates to in common speak: lowering recruitment standards. So people with medical problems, they may be included in the military now. Permanent residence is opening the door to non-citizen service. Essentially, your military is beginning the process of turning Canada into a mercenary army or a foreign legion. So people who aren't even citizens will be on the front lines if they can recruit them. They're celebrating the 455th member to join, and they've got a 16,000 member recruitment problem. How long is it before they lower the standards even further to give a pathway to citizenship to non-citizens and non-permanent residents to join and try and bolster the Canadian military? They have killed morale with their DEI woke nonsense. They have killed morale with their underfunding. They have destroyed the spirit of Canada by saying we're a post-national state and a cultural mosaic, saying that we don't even have a core identity. The very thing that almost broke the back of the U.S. military, the woke nonsense that infected them under Biden, sending their recruitment levels to the basement, which is now being fixed by the incoming Trump administration. All of a sudden, Americans want to serve again, is what we are going full steam ahead with. We're not dealing with problems. We're just going to create more problems because these people, these political people, these DEI wokesters who are running things cannot admit they've gone wrong. They cannot admit they've gone off course and change trajectory. Their plan is more of the same. So let's move on to the installation of Mark Carney as your next Prime Minister, an unelected Prime Minister. He will not sit in Parliament because he doesn't have a seat. He will rule over Parliament from the outside. This farce, known as the Liberal Leadership Convention, which the entire country has been put on hold so that they can sort out their internal drama and swap out Trudeau and try and create a narrative that Poilievre is beatable. The first guy that faced the axe was Chandra Arya. The Liberals opened the voting in their party to anybody over the age of 14 years old, and they allowed people to register for free. This was their decision. So people did register in the hundreds of thousands because they wanted to undermine the Trudeau regime. That's a fact. Chandra was who everybody united behind, and so they found a way to disqualify him. So they kicked out Chandra, and that left us with Ruby Dalla. The line reads from Robert Fife, Liberal Party questions leadership candidate Ruby Dalla over possible interference from India. I want to remind you that the federal NDP, which is a federal party, has been completely taken over by Sikhs. Where do Sikhs come from? And I've often said that they provide a model for the rest of Canada to follow. Canada tried to follow it for this Liberal leadership vote, but the wrong elements in Canada followed it. These elements, the old elements, the elements that underpin the old Canadian identity are not allowed to have a political voice. You've seen what happened during the Freedom Convoy. It's the same thing, just transplanted to politics. So they joined to back Chandra. Well, they've moved their support to Ruby. So we just had a Foreign Interference Commission whitewash, which failed to name any MPs that are under foreign interference. We've seen how the Chinese Communist Party is allowed to launder money in Canada, operate police stations, have their soldiers trained by us. I've shown you in my previous video how terrorists, literal terrorist organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas launder money in this country, how they infiltrate the United States from here. This is not conspiracy theory stuff. This is like mainstream news. This is public government documents. This is the RCMP and CSIS, what they say about the state of our country. So they whitewash the whole thing. They've never named a single person involved, but they're going to drudge up possible interference as a disqualifying factor. If they can't find hard evidence, they're going to say that the allegations are enough that they muddy the waters and they'll just kick her out because they can do that. They're going to install Carney. And whether they can publish as many fake polls as they want, there is a movement, and this is Canada, this is how broken we are. There is, I believe, a genuine undercurrent that is satisfied with Trudeau being swapped out for another guy. There's such a level of hypnosis in this country that people will actually believe the story that Mark Carney is their hero. I don't believe it's as strong as some of the polls show. Internally, they know the truth, and they're not going to tell you the truth. If they believe that Mark Carney can't win an election, there will be no election. The NDP will keep the Liberals in office, not just through 25, they can push it out as far as 26. And because they've got everybody primed to accept the Emergencies Act, and because Carney is open about his intention to use the Emergencies Act for everything, to impose the World Economic Forum's agenda on Canada, to basically impose a socialist dictatorship. This isn't a conspiracy theory. He's campaigning on it. He's telling you what he's going to do. With that in mind, he can keep himself in power out past 26. We could have suspended elections. If the pressure from the United States becomes intense enough, that will be their justification. The Canadian government will respond in kind to U.S. tariffs. The deadline is looming, and that will cause the Canadian public pain. The Canadian government will tell you the pain is because of Trump, because you've been indoctrinated to hate the orange man and to ignore the evidence of your eyes, which is the massive amount of good work the American government is doing right now. You will turn. The public will turn. They will blame Trump. And that will be the justification for a cessation, for a delay in the elections, and to keep Mark Carney, the unelected prime minister, in power. And then they will ratchet up the pain. And the suffering will be acute. And if they believe they can get away with it, they will keep that suffering up, and they will tell you it's Trump's fault. And if enough of you believe it, then Canadians will be in a world of prolonged pain. How Mexican cartels and Chinese criminal networks are moving cocaine of the sea through Canada's ports. This is from February 14th, 2025. I've showed you in previous videos how massive a scale of drug trafficking and export and import is happening here in Canada. It is a huge percent of our GDP. This is just one absurd example of many. Every single day we hear about busts. Every single day we see the scale, but nobody connects the dots and puts it all together for you to understand that in order for it to be this way, somebody in a position of power wants it to be this way. And they want you to think that Trump is the bad guy. Now, what is Trump doing? Trump could be about to ban COVID vaccines, report. And all of a sudden, everybody's talking about the harms of mRNA technology and how it needs to be reviewed. Trump is alone in the world for admitting that this is a problem and for wanting to do something about it. We have RFK Jr. heading up Health and Human Services. This is the beginning of a great unveiling of a truth that many of you know, many of you rightly refused. You were coerced, you were removed from your work, you were kept from your family, and you were told to get this. We're about to learn the truth. Trump signs executive order terminating all federal taxpayer benefits going to illegal aliens. Wouldn't you love it if Canada did something like this? Instead, in Canada, we take your money and we give it away to people who have never paid in. Canada, I've often said, doesn't have so much of an illegal immigration problem. We have a legal immigration problem. We bring people in en masse, we give them legal right to be here, and then we cut them big and massive checks with money we don't even have. Instead of funding the military, instead of doing something about our problems, we just import millions of people and put them right on subsidy, and you get to pay for it. House Republicans drafting impeachment articles against activist judges blocking Doge. In Canada, we don't have this ability. Our judges are appointed. Many of them are active, progressive activists that Trudeau handpicked. It's the same story in the Senate, where he has installed, it's going to be 93% of the Senate is going to be Trudeau appointees, and they're all radicals. And you as a citizen have no legal or populist mechanism for doing anything about it. Wouldn't you love to have the ability to actually challenge a politicized bench or a politicized Senate? Good luck, you don't have it. This is why I'm always asking, what is it that people are hanging on to about the political system in this country? They tell you to swaddle yourself in the Canadian flag while they rode roughshod over it during the convoy, while they have done everything to weaken this nation for decades, and you lap it up. You have this identity. People think that Canada and its identity, its people and its land would go away if we changed our flag or we changed our system of government. I would invite everybody, and maybe I need to make a video segment about this eventually, to examine Virginia. A member of the United States, they have their own constitution. They preserve their own individualistic character. Does anybody actually understand how powerful statehood actually is? It's far more powerful than the articles of this federation that you have now. The rights of the Constitution are far more powerful than your charter. And you can keep your flag and have more freedom. You can keep your history. It doesn't go away. I don't know why people are hanging on. Eruption in Bleach Bit, wipe hard drive, and offshore bank searches in D.C. suggest deep state panic mode because the Trump administration, you see, search results and data seldom lie when they're collected raw. And there's a lot of people trying to hide the evidence of their malfeasance. I don't know how folks can't see that the Trump administration and Doge and everything that they're doing is actually about uncovering the waste, fraud, and abuse. Watch the interview between Sean Hannity, Elon Musk, and Donald Trump. The difference between them and your average politician is, yes, Donald Trump has some talking points, but he's real and he's genuine. Elon Musk is real and genuine. They're telling you up front. People are panicking because they're about to get caught. And I think the Canadian government is deeply tied up in it. One of the reasons I think that is Canadian aid workers warn catastrophic U.S. aid halt puts Ottawa's projects in limbo. So money coming from U.S. aid filtered through the hands of Canadians. This corruption that they're uncovering is disrupting Canadian corruption. House Republicans strike deal to cut $1.5 trillion from budget, paving way for Trump's legislative agenda. Yes, the Trump administration is trying to balance the books. A $2 trillion deficit. That's equal to Canada's GDP. That is not some kind of accounting error. The amount of money and interest payments alone is enough to fund the rebuilding of the United States. They're directly addressing it. There's nobody in Canada talking about addressing the massive problem with our finances. We need some kind of Doge here. But instead, the government, through their media, is trying to program you to think that this is a bad thing, that exposing corruption to the light of day is actually an evil act. Everything they do, Team Canada, by calling themselves Team Canada, they're engaging in Orwellian speak. They're anti-Canada to the max, and they have been this entire time. I wish people would wake up. This might be the biggest fraud in history. This is just more data points talking about there's like 2 million people over the age of 140 collecting Social Security. Trump calls out massive Social Security fraud after Doge exposes ancient vampires. So 200 to 209 years old, there's 879 people getting benefits. 210 to 219 years old, another 866. Like this is the stuff that they're finding. I wish people would read the details. I wish people would read different news sources, because the CBC, the CTV, Global News, they're not actually telling you that the Trump administration is engaged in noble pursuit, period. That they called out our massive drug and crime problem here in Canada. They called out our border problem. They're not telling you about the reality of that problem. They're not connecting the dots. They're just saying Orange Man is bad, and you're buying it. Doge finds $4.7 trillion in virtually untraceable treasury payments. Does the American taxpayer not deserve to find that? And by the way, in that interview with Sean Hannity, it was pitched that there might be a Doge dividend for the American people. So when they find all this money, that they take 20% of the savings and they just give it back to the taxpayer. Once again, your media is telling you that's bad. They're bribing the taxpayer. No, they're giving you your money back. They're going to find it. They're going to make sure that the U.S. government is operating fairly, and they'll give you some of that money back. How is that bad? Washington recession begins. D.C. active home listings soar. Jobless claims spike as Doge drains swamp. The rats fleeing the shit. CIA reportedly flying MQ-9 spy drones over Mexico as cartel fight nears. I still think the Americans are going to bomb them. They're going to bomb the cartels. Because if they just sanction them and seize their assets, if the U.S. government changes in 4 years, which it may not, because if these accomplishments are actually realized, if they actually get this done, the American public is going to rally to Trump. That's why he has a higher job approval now than he's ever had, period, because he's getting results. I think they have to kill them. They can't just take their stuff and shut them down for a while. They have got to kill off the cartels, and I believe they are developing a strike list. I believe they're gathering all the intelligence they need to go in and take them out in a day or two's operation. Special forces, the whole 9 yards. What's Mexico going to do? The Americans would be doing them a favor. Also, the lawfare. We'll go to this one first. Hochul scrambles to oust Adams after New York City mayor starts working with Trump. So Adams is the mayor of New York. The governor is trying to oust this mayor because he is cooperating with Trump because his streets are overrun with crime and he would like to do something about it. This is nothing new, but instead of it being Russiagate and impeachment and the highest halls of power trying to undermine Trump this time, the Democrats are down to local judges trying to stop the function of executive orders, and they're down to trying to remove mayors. The thing that I'm trying to highlight is the level of resistance that the Democrats and the deep state is able to organize against Trump in this iteration is much depleted. The progressive agenda is completely discredited. It's not going to rise again the way that it has been for the last 10 years. It's over. I mean, Canada might not have the memo, but it is over. The DEI nonsense, the woke nonsense, the corruption in the military, all this stuff, it's going to go away. It's a fait accompli. And this is a symbol of how weak their power actually is right now. 14 states sue to block Doge from uncovering government abuses, slashing waste. Turns out an Obama-appointed judge denied that request and turned it away. So Doge gets to keep going. And the thing is, Trump came out the gate so fast. He started going in so many different directions with such authority and such speed that he caught everybody off guard. They can't organize a resistance because they're bewildered. It's called, as George Bush Jr. might have said, shock and awe. He's implementing shock and awe on the U.S. deep state. And the more corruption they uncover, the stronger their case gets. They've got enough on their hands now that it's going to be hard to find a judge in the land that's going to want to stop them. Because if you go to a judge and you've got clear evidence of corruption, you've got clear evidence of fraud, how's that judge going to say, you need to stop your work? I have clear criminality on my hands, but I'm going to decide to stop you in your investigation. It's not going to happen. It's only going to accelerate and continue. This momentum that is building in the United States shouldn't make you scared. You should be celebrating it. You, as a Canadian, should be looking to the United States for inspiration. Why are your political leaders not celebrating Trump? Instead, they're getting prepared to sacrifice your livelihood and your well-being, and indeed the nation itself, to try and erect some kind of speed bump in front of the Trump administration. It's not going to work. Canada, by comparison, is a fly on the wall to the monster that is the American economy. And why are you so afraid of statehood? Why are you so afraid of renegotiating the Federation? Why are our leaders all united in their stance that the Federation must stand not Canada, not the people, not the land, but the politics and the system, which has robbed you blind, which has led to the moment that we're in? You are not a traitor to your nation to recognize that the system that has been imposed on the people and the land is inherently unfair and disenfranchises all of us. The Americans are lighting the way. They're showing us how it should be done, and we should be smart enough to follow. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one. Did you know that I have a website? frankvaughn.ca, the ultimate repository for all of my work, and a backup location just in case the censors come for me again. And if you like the content, please consider using the donate link in one of the options available. There are no paywalls, there is no advertising, and there is no Patreon, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you for your time and your consideration.